Welcome everyone to this month's Community Voices. Um, these sessions are really an opportunity to open up the floor and welcome different V DAO contributors in to share some thoughts and kind of spark a conversation on a topic that interests them. This month, we're really excited to be joined by Pranav Khanna, who's got a lot of experience in circular fashion. And he's going to be leading us through this conversation today. I'm really glad that you guys could all be here. As we're going through, feel free to jump in, unmute yourselves. There's also the chat there. You can drop questions for Pranav in there, and yeah, let's kick off this conversation. Over to you, Pranav.
Thanks so much. Hi everybody. Thank you so much for taking out the time and being here in this conversation with me. My name is Pranav Khanna. I'm speaking to you from Mumbai, India. I come in from a background of garment manufacturing and textiles. Hi, Sasha. Yeah, so thanks for that. I'm going to just kind of slow down a minute, and I would love for folks to also write down where else they're from. So Livy Chain, Laura, if you can just type, where you're from, that'd be great. Because I was about to fall into a bad habit that I have. And the bad habit essentially is to just launch off like a train, right, onto the subject matter without really welcoming everybody into the space. So, hi, Laura, welcome. Texas is the place to be. That's definitely, love that.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm recently joined the DAO. I'm Livia from Peru.
Nice, Peru. Great. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So yeah, I come in from a background of garment manufacturing and textile. So I started off trained as a computer engineer, but my family has been in the textiles business I'm the third generation. So I ended up doing a post-graduation in garment manufacturing technology, and believe it or not, used to be such a thing some time back, right? And this was from one of India's premier institutes. In fact, the only premier institute at that time. Was fortunate enough to work on assembly line manufacturing just out of college. Joined the family business and ran the garment manufacturing business for almost like 15, 20 years now. 2012, I moved into sustainable fashion, and that's where my journey with the whole organic space began. And since then, I've been fortunate enough to wear multiple hats, be part of some very exciting adventures. I have been part of India's first circular fashion platform called CAIF. I'm also associated with India's largest circular design challenge, which is led by the main Fashion Week for India. Along my journey, I've also been part of various accelerators and incubators as a mentor. In general, just helping startups scale from 0 to 1. Apart from fashion, I've also been fortunate enough to, really follow my instincts along the whole sustainability, leading and requiring the whole traceability and transparency aspect, and going down that rabbit hole to eventually end up in crypto. And that's where my interests currently lie, at the intersection of blockchain and climate. That's where I am currently. But yeah, fashion runs through my veins, and I still have a small garment manufacturing unit here in Mumbai where I manufacture for some local brands. So that's essentially like the background, and one of the reasons that I'm offering and I'm bringing to you certain thoughts and certain perspectives around fashion. But before I sort of get into the next part of, and I have a little presentation, I'm just curious to understand who all here either are from the fashion space or are looking to get into the fashion space. I mean, I just want to understand what's the interest for you being part of this conversation. I'm just going to call out people just to have, go through it. And Olivia, Peru, maybe you want to kick us off?
Yes, I love fashion. And also, I been part of Fab Labs,
Okay.
digital fabrication, and I always interested in how to design with this or I see examples with mushrooms or new materials.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more like I like innovation, um, and I appreciate the fashion. And also I understand that it's a problem, the fast fashion is, but
Mm-hmm.
also I'm still buying. So so I think that is not congruence, but okay, but yeah, I would like to know how to be more involved in this
Mm-hmm.
in this
Nice,
area.
absolutely. And I'm hopefully, we can have certain jump points for you where you can actually get involved more into the space. Donnie, my friend, how are you?
I am very well, sir. How are you?
I'm good. Pleasure to have you on the space.
It's always great to be here. I wouldn't miss learning from you, my friend. You know that.
It's an honor.
It's
Absolute
it's
honor.
always important. There's always more to learn. I've been, pretty well involved in the fashion industry for my entire adult life. So I've seen it from the inside, outside, upside, downside, all the different ways that you want to look at it. And I think there's still more to learn and more to learn about how we can improve it, because that was a thing that, at a certain point in my life, I started to really realize like how destructive and how bad it really is. And then when you go down that rabbit hole, you really see a whole big dirty mess and you start thinking, wow, I've got to do something. Somebody has to. And I'm a somebody. We're all somebody. So
You
that's kind
are
of me.
a very big somebody for sure. So yes,
Good.
thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Laura, I see you've written, you just want a general interest in learning about different sectors of the sustainability industry, but also recognizing that waste in the fashion industry continues to grow as a problem. Absolutely. And this is one of the perspectives that I hope to bring to the group today in terms of really looking at, how when one looks at circular fashion and circular economy, one should really look at it as a giant customer loyalty program, right? And I'll jump a little bit more into that further in the conversation. Sasha, welcome. Any particular thought? What interests you specifically? You're on mute, my friend.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. Also,
All
after
right.
all these years, it's always the same, huh? You're on mute. So my stories, I'm basically here because I got a follower of V DAO. I met them some weeks ago in Brussels, and really like their idea of bringing and mixing together the digital and the real world. And I'm into a little bit like Laura. So my journey, my deeper journey into sustainability began just 1.5 years ago. And since then, I would say I'm kind of figuring out where to find my place. I have an idea already, but I learned, I mean, it's a universe, right? So the whole sustainability topic is a universe, right? And so I understood that it's more a transition phase, and I'm really glad to connect with people where I think, yeah, kind of it's not on the surface, but it's more like really coming from the heart, and that's why I'm here, and very glad that V DAO is organizing all these different views on this topic. And thank you for your time and insights.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sasha. That's it's always good to have this participation from the DAO for the members, right? It's really makes it interesting for everybody. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
I will just be sharing my screen. And I have a little slide deck that I would just like to walk everybody through. Yeah. Can you see my screen? Perfect. Awesome.
Yes.
So I want everybody to have this perspective right now that what we're talking about, although is in the language of fashion, we're actually looking at it and wanting to get to the perspective of a larger circular economy per se, right? Because the whole circularity concept, the whole circularity uh, hypothesis or value proposition really applies across industries. And although we are talking fashion here specifically because circularity in fashion presents its own unique challenges, there are a lot of lessons that we can learn and a lot of technologies we can leverage, as well as a lot of inspiration and support that we can take from circularity in other industries. And I want you to just hold in your mind the whole recycled plastic example, when we talk about things, because that's had a certain measure of success, right? So what we're going to talk about is going to be like a beginner's guide to circular economy. That being said, we will have a more nuanced view on fashion, right? So that's where we take it from there, right? The first point or suggestion that I have for everybody is to really look at it as an opportunity, right? Fashion is, as a lot of the world's problems, a very wicked problem, right? There is a lot of vested interest, just like the petroleum industry, just like the whole fossil fuel industry. There's this huge vested interest in perpetuating fashion as it exists today. So it is a challenge, but it is also a huge opportunity. It's an opportunity to upskill for a lot of us, right? In terms of the language that we speak, the skill set that we have, the business models that we work with, right? It's an opportunity to strategize in terms of, okay, how can we really build very close relationships with customers, with our suppliers, with our value chain. And it's an opportunity to reset. And this reset is really a personal reset, right? I mean, there are enough statistics out there that most of us have wardrobes which we would be essentially using maybe 30% of it on an average, right? Probably even lesser. And this is like clothes that we wear regularly. There's probably like upwards of 50% of our wardrobe which we don't even touch. And I encourage everybody to look at fashion as a reset in terms of your way of thinking. I mean, a lot of us, at certain points in our life, when we are in a funk, if I can call it, or are at a certain, point where we seem to be stuck, it's amazing how this reset in terms of transitioning to a different lifestyle can really get us out of that place where we are stuck at. Because believe you me, fashion makes a man, or it's what you wear is what you project, and that projection can really change the way people look at you, can also change the way that you look at yourself. So I'm linking it out here with your skill set, I'm linking it out here with your supply chain, and I'm also linking it out here with your mental state, right? That's the opportunity really. Now, if I were to ask you, and you see like two questions out here in terms of pictures, right? On the left side, there's like family, and there's like humans, and there's like different values. And on the right hand side is money, right? And there's just 6 of us, and I'm sure we can just quickly have like a show of hands, or just just shout it out aloud. What would be more important to you? Overwhelmingly, when one is really thinking about it, it's family that wins out, right? Because over the long run, in the long term, money is just a tool really, to get us to be with family, to support our family, to encourage our family, to build our family really, right? So that's what the brands are also very cognizant about, right? And although brands are increasingly focused and have always been focused on the bottom line, the projection that they do out there is really about family and about values. And a lot of names that you see out there have been accused of and are guilty of greenwashing, no question about it. But they have been making efforts, right? So the biggest one, H&M, for example, is like a poster boy of, you know, a brand which causes so much damage because of all of the fast fashion that they put out there. But as with all things in life, it is also a fact that H&M has one of the largest, I would say, departments or, you know, groups within the organization looking at innovation, looking at new materials, looking at closing the loop per se, right? And one would think, you know, why is that? It's because not only is it good for the business in terms of just looking at family, right, in terms of the perception, but it also makes for a good business model, right? And this is where I want to introduce this concept of thinking about circular economy as a giant customer loyalty program, right? Think about a situation where when you are selling garments or when you are selling products to your customer, you have the option, you provide this option to your customers that, you know what, when you're done with the product, just bring it back to us and we'll take care of it, right? Maybe it's torn, maybe you're bored with it, maybe you feel that, you know, it doesn't look good anymore, maybe it's out of fashion, doesn't really matter. Bring it back to us. And when they bring it back to you, you offer them a voucher. And the voucher essentially can be redeemed only at your business. If you think about it, once you have this mechanism in place, once you have this loyalty program in place where customers can return what they purchased from you, bring it back to you and get some discount, some voucher, some coupon towards the next purchase from you, now you have a relationship with this customer. And effectively, you're locking him in to your value, to your supply chain. Now, the same example or the same mechanism can also be applied at all the different parts of your supply chain. So, for example, your supplier, the one who gives you fabrics, could do the same with you. And now, because you are able to return your unused fabrics to your supplier, you potentially are going to have a much deeper relationship with the supplier. And this is how it goes throughout the value chain, right? Now, this brings about a couple of very interesting opportunities, if I can call it. The one opportunity or the one benefit that brings about is that because you know what is that the material that you're giving out to your customer will come back to you, you will design the material in a way that you're able to reprocess it because you really want to lower your costs. So circularity, when it's placed in, you know, a closed loop, as we call it, when the material has the possibility to come back to you, enables you to reduce your costs. Then there's this added benefit of you really being able to secure your brand. And we know for a fact that there have been multiple challenges throughout the years that brands have faced when certain products can cause consumers harm. And they find it very difficult the brands find it very difficult to mitigate that disaster. I mean, people might remember or might be aware of, building collapses in Bangladesh, something called Rana Plaza, where a fast fashion complex building came down and killed quite a large number of people. There were brands which were actually producing in the building, and they faced a lot of consumer pushback and consumer anger because of it. But there were also certain brands which were not producing there, but they also faced consumer anger because consumers thought that they were also producing in Bangladesh in the same building. Now, if you have your supply chain mapped out completely, if you have these close relationships, if you know what material is moving through your system, you can actually present this information to your customers to really avoid this sort of brand damage per se, right? So there's like costs for reducing costs through circularity. There's like protecting your brand through circularity, right? And then there's, of course, this whole point of having efficiencies. right? Because if you're able to track and trace the material, the entire supply chain through this circularity relationship process, then you can actually have more efficiency in your process. Now, what I've just outlined to you is like, the common pushback that we face when we talk about circular economy, right? Where people will come back to you, oh, but why should we do it? Fast fashion is cheap. How does it really help me? What are the benefits of going circular, right? So the benefits really, start off with protecting your brand or improving your brand positioning, your brand perception. Then there's the benefit of really, having this close loyalty program or the lifetime value, as we call it, with your customer. Then there is this whole reducing your costs, right? Because you are having improved efficiencies in your supply chain. That's essentially, some of the main reasons and the logic that we give to people when we are questioned about, why should we do this, right? Because going circular does involve costs, especially in the fashion space, right? Now, this is the other challenge that we face, right? Where most people will come to us and say, you know what, sustainable fashion is a myth, right? There's nothing like sustainable fashion. Oh, you're using cotton, that takes up water, a lot of water, and you have like forced labor, right? Oh, you're dyeing materials with, dyes which then leach into rivers, right? So that means it's bad for water supplies. Oh, you're overproducing, right? So when one is thinking about sustainable fashion, I want you to have this pyramid in your mind, right? At the base of the pyramid, you have fast fashion. And yes, fast fashion does all of these things, right? Fast fashion uses up a lot of water in cotton production. Fast fashion is monoculture. Fast fashion in dyeing leaches dyes into rivers, pollutes water supply. Fast fashion overproduces, ends up as, in textile dumps across the world. So that's like the base, right? When we really start, when we really stop using harmful chemicals in the fashion supply chain, at that point, we start talking about organic, right? And you'll come across this term quite frequently in fashion, right? Where it'll be like organic cotton, or, you'll talk about linens, which are produced sustainability. That's sort of the second layer, right? Where you are now using less chemicals, maybe you're using dyes which are not harmful for the environment, right? So that's where we call it organic, and organic fashion, or sustainable, fashion, as we can call it, right? When you go to the next layer, and this is where it becomes more difficult, you also start addressing the challenges of producing fashion in a place where you're paying your workers a living wage. Because this is one of the big challenges of fashion, is that fashion, fast fashion especially, is produced in countries which are employing very cheap labor. They are paying the workers below minimum wages, below living wages. And that's another challenge that fast fashion really, is guilty of. So this is where we have the third layer of the pyramid, right? Which is what we call ethical fashion. So not only are you using, organic cotton, or you're using materials which are sustainable, you're dyeing them in dyes which are not polluting the waterways, but you're also, employing people, and you're also paying the workers a fair wage. At that point, we can call fashion as ethical fashion, right? So what I've told you about is like fast fashion, which is all the dirty things. Then you have organic fashion, which is where, you're starting to have, less chemicals, and, stop hurting the environment per se. Then the third tier is what we call ethical fashion, which is where we are not harming any people in the process of producing the fashion. But then even at this point, we are still overproducing. There's a lot of material that we're producing, and there's a lot of garments that we're producing. So the next layer, and the topmost layer, and the layer that we really want to get to, is circular fashion. And that's where we close the loop with our customers, where we tell the customers that, you know what, you can buy what you want, but once you're done with it, please bring it back. And we have processes in place to either upcycle it, to either downcycle it, to either recycle it, or, repair it, refurbish it. All of those options are available to us. at the circular fashion level, right? So this is the sort of pyramid. This is my suggestion to you to have in mind when you look at fashion. Bottom, fast fashion, then you have organic, then you have ethical, and then at the top, you have like closed circular fashion. But then when we talk about, circular fashion, what are the principles, right? I mean, what are like the basic minimum things when we talk about this? We call these principles, and these are taken from work done by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And very simple, right? What we want to do is we want to design out waste and pollution. So we want to make sure we are not using any harmful chemicals. We want to ensure that we are growing cotton in a sustainable fashion. It's organic. We want to ensure that we are, not producing fibers out of petroleum, out of fossil fuels, and so on and so forth. And this is where the intervention is done at the design stage. Even when we are producing garments in this stage, we can ensure that we are not having waste while we are producing the garment, right? So that is also the whole principle is around designing out waste and pollution. The second principle is keeping products and materials in use as long as possible. And this one is more around business models, right? Where we incentivize people to maybe rent clothes. And, this is especially true for uniforms. That's like a big business. We also don't throw away garments. We upcycle them. This is the huge business about vintage clothing. And even if we want to throw away garments, we downcycle them. We turn them into different products maybe, right? So there's like, this is the entire field is about based on the principle of keeping products and materials in use as long as possible. And then lastly, this is regenerate natural systems, right? Where we want to ensure that the materials that we have to put out to decay, which we can't do anything more with, we are able to help them decompose into the natural systems, thereby become part and regenerate the natural systems themselves, right? Just those three basic principles. First one is a design intervention. Second one is a consumer behavior intervention. And the third one is really ensuring that we regenerate natural systems. This is like the main sort of meat of the matter, right? The diagram where we see textile recycling at a glance. What you see on your screen out here is like the entire value chain of a garment, right? It starts off in your left-hand top corner with raw materials. It goes into a production process where the raw material gets converted into a fiber, into a yarn. The yarn gets converted into fabric. The fabric gets converted into a garment. The garment then moves to a retailer. A user buys from the retailer. The user, and you can see there are some loops defined. And this is where I want to take you through the loops. At every stage, there is the possibility to close the loop. So for example, in the production process, you'll see there's a loop called recycling of pre-consumer waste, right? Now, this is where material, which is a waste of the process itself, can be reused to produce new garments. That's like one loop that we have within the process itself. Let's look at another loop, right? The retailer sends it to the user. The user can actually give it back to the retailer. That's another loop. The user can also, sort of give it to external sorters, right? And those sorters can then separate the garments, which can then be reused maybe, or they can be composted. It can be like an open loop recycling, or then they can be sent for shredding, discoloration to go back to the production process. So as you can see on the diagram out here, at every stage of the value chain, there is a possibility to close the loop. And this is where there's like a bunch of business models in there, a bunch of value propositions in there, a bunch of businesses in there, right? So that's the opportunity set that I was talking to you about. Now, why are we really talking about? Yeah.
Sorry, Pranav, can I hop in at this point? I'm really fascinated by this previous slide here. In particular, this piece about compostable garments. I think it was also mentioned on the previous slide as well. Like, could you kind of double click on that a bit. It's the first time I'm kind of coming across this concept, and I'm curious about like how that works, and also if it's happening at scale, or even if there are startups experimenting with this kind of compostable fashion.
So if you think about a garment which is made primarily of cotton, now cotton is compostable, right? It will go back into nature, right? The problem is that when we are producing the garment, when we are stitching the garment, we are using thread which might be polyester. That's a problem. We might have buttons which are like plastic. That's a problem. We might have labels, which don't compose. Now that's a problem. And that is where there is this entire process of collection and sorting, which is where a garment is literally physically broken down into these various elements. And that's really possible when there is enough of a traceability and transparency about all the elements that go into the garment, right? And yes, there are businesses that work at this intersection. Specifically, there are businesses, for example, there is, I don't have the name of the company on the tip of my tongue, but there are businesses which are essentially, RenewCell was a famous one which closed down because of lack of demand. But there's a bunch of others. There's ones in Australia which are doing very well, which are essentially taking these garments, which may be mixed fiber, by the way, right? So you have garments made of cotton, you have garments made of polyester, and then you also have garments made of blends, which are the most difficult to recycle or compost, right? So you actually have businesses which have developed technologies which can fractionalize and separate out the cotton, the cellulose, from the polyester, right? So there's like a technology loop that can be put in here, really, to bring back the raw material from this, right? Another example that I want to point out to you, which is not the most popular one, is about plastics. We've all heard and read about plastics which are compostable, and there's a lot of business and a lot of opportunity out there. Those plastics sort of decompose into the environment, especially the bags, right, which we use for waste, right? So garments are a similar concept to that. The challenge with garments, however, is that before we can do that, we need to separate out the various elements in a garment: the thread, the buttons, the accessories, the lining, and so on and so forth. So absolutely, there is a bunch of businesses, there's a bunch of opportunities out there. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, super interesting. Thank you. Thanks.
Absolutely. And yes, we'll come back to all of the slides, right? I just want to give you like a complete picture before I bring you back, right? Because it's a very interesting point out here that, when I offer this to you, you're thinking, right, this is great. There are costs involved, there are challenges, but why is there a lot more focus about this right now? Well, that's because there's a lot of regulation that is coming in. And the regulation is actually coming in from governments wanting to protect industries, right? The European Union wants a lot more manufacturing to happen in Europe. So they're doing a lot of this, trade barriers wherein they are asking for a lot of traceability and transparency from supply chains. And they want to ensure, for example, rubber, especially tires, this has already been put in place, that tire companies which want to export to Europe have to confirm that the rubber is not coming from plantations which are on forest land. And that can happen using technology, right? So there are tailwinds for circularity. There's a lot more around the European Green Deal. There is a lot more around the right to repair. There is a lot more government support for business models that allow consumers to have this opportunity to recycle. So that's the tailwind for a lot of these conversations. And the exporting nations, countries like India, recognize this as a challenge and an opportunity, right? So that's like a big tailwind that is coming for this. This is mostly the last slide, and then we'll get into sort of discussing this. I mean, obviously this is just like the tip of the conversation, and you're really thinking, right, how can I really take this conversation forward? Of course, one of the most important things is to really educate yourself, and there's like a bunch of solutions and a bunch of links that I'm happy to share with people who are interested in this, around educating yourself on circular economy, and then within circular economy, circular fashion. But I think one of the best ways to really learn about this is to go read up case studies about brands which have leveraged circular fashion to really make a place for themselves in consumer wallets, in customer wallets, right? And once you start seeing that, then you come back to your own business, then you come back to the own work that you do. And the first thing that you really need to think about is, how do you measure this in your business? How do you measure circular economy? What are the metrics that you want to track? Because it's important that you track it across your supply chain. This is one of the big challenges for circularity, is that if you are circular, if you are sustainable, but if your downstream and your upstream is not circular, is not sustainable, then you will not be able to get the full benefits of circularity. So it's important for you to start to identify, okay, what are the metrics on which I want to really be sustainable? You could start with the lowest hanging fruit, which is what all businesses start with. You could start using sustainable packaging, right? So that's like a little bit of greenwashing. The real challenge really is ensuring that you develop these very close relationships with your suppliers, right? In terms of, okay, these are the parameters on which we want to measure circularity, and then you start building those relationships. Now, in order to do that, you're going to have to do what we call the circular business model canvas, which will help you build all of this circularity on a piece of paper. And why is that important? Because you need to share that with your suppliers, and more importantly, you need to share that within your business, because you can rest assured most of your team doesn't really understand what's this new fad that you've picked up, what's gotten into you, why are you talking circularity all of a sudden. So you need to make sure that you're having the same level of communication within your business, your entire business, and the canvas can really help you do that, in addition to helping you really frame out your business in its full circularity. And then, of course, you really need to participate and attend events, right? Because that's where you'll find all the reasons to being circular. And there's a lot of opportunity out there. It's still early days for the whole circularity aspect of it. When I say India specific, I mean whichever country you're in, right? There are specific organizations which are working in this space, and believe you me, ESG ties into this, carbon credits tie into this, all of the buzzwords that we read about, the triple bottom line, all of that ties into circularity, right? So no matter where you catch this string from, you'll be able to really go down the rabbit hole when you start speaking this language of circularity. Please do use this opportunity to really connect with industry leaders. There's some very low-hanging fruit, because there's still a lot of alpha in the space, as we call in crypto, right? It's a challenging space. So a lot more people are not really following the leaders and not really leveraging this opportunity, right? And of course, to understand this a lot more, there's a bunch of educational videos out there. There's online courses and books that you can really take up, and I'm happy to give you specific jump off points depending upon what is it that you're interested in, right? There's also a little next steps that I've sort of put out there. I'm not going to go into that. We can talk about that later on. But yeah, I'm going to stop sharing now because I've been speaking for a long time. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Pranav.
The comments. Yeah, and feel free to jump in with questions.
That was a really interesting kind of presentation you did there, and I'm curious to hear if people have any questions or want to kind of kick off a conversation. One thing I want to pick up on though is this kind of thread that ran through about greenwashing. It's also come up in the chat there. And I wonder if we could kind of explore that in more detail. Like, what do we mean by greenwashing, and where do we draw a line in terms of, like, if a retailer or a business is actually making efforts in a positive direction, at what point does that become like a kind of just a marketing exercise rather than a meaningful process of change?
Absolutely. So there are a couple of filters that immediately come to mind, right? One of the best filters is, are they closing the loop? Are they taking the material back from the customers? And most businesses fail on this filter, right? There's like very few brands who offer to take back the product that they sell to you, right? And even when they take it back from you, what do they do with it? Do they just take it back and send it to the landfill? Do they just take it back and give it to charity? Or do they actually process it to become part of their value chain? So the holy grail is really a brand which is taking back garments and then putting them back into its value chain. That's like great, right? If however a brand is taking it back and then there's a black hole in terms of what's happening to those garments, for example, H&M, then it's greenwashing for sure. Okay, so that's like one filter out there. Another filter is where brands will talk about, the fact that they're sourcing sustainably. So you'll read a lot about this, right? Where brands say that our supply chain is sustainable, and they will talk about how they are sourcing garments from farms which are organic, and they're producing it in factories which are ethical, right? Now the key point to really track out there is what are the technologies that they're using to provide transparency into this entire value chain. And most of the times you will find solutions like a QR code, where if you scan it, the brand will tell you about, oh, this particular worker made your product, right? And you can reasonably be sure that it's a story, right? Because it's like the same QR code for like all the products, right? So when you start really looking at, okay, what is it?
It's the same story
Sorry?
it's the same story for every garment. Like one person made everything in the whole shop.
Exactly, right? A lot of times it happens. You'll be surprised, right? Because it's the same goddamn QR code that they're using, right? So when you actually start asking them for those metrics that, hey, you know what, great, you say you're transparent and you're sourcing sustainability, where can I see it? Okay, what are the metrics that you're using to track it, right? So that's like another level of greenwashing. Then there's another level of greenwashing which has been going on for years, and that's using standards. So for example, you have something called Global Organic Textile Standards, GOTS, right? And then this business will say, hey, you know what, we are GOTS certified, and therefore we are sustainable. But the problem is that the GOTS certified guys themselves are not really tracking it well. So the veracity of the brand really depends upon the standard that they are ascribing to. And most of those times, those standards start to fail, right? Because there's a conflict of interest. The people who issue the standard are auditing for the standard also. And that's like a clear conflict of interest, right? Because I'm the guy who gives you the certificate, but I'm also the guy who certifies that you're following the process, right? So there's no two different arms, which creates a problem, right? So that's another sort of greenwashing that happens, right? So yes, long story short, there is a lot of greenwashing that happens in the industry. If you were to ask me how many brands that are there which are like really truly circular, it's probably like a handful. And even they are like on the gray spectrum, because it is really challenging, right? And hence, the key here is to really ask the question, what is it that the brand is tracking and how are they measuring progress, right? So if they are tracking their supply, then how much of their supply is coming from organic cotton farms, right? If it is like maybe like 3% of their entire production is coming from organic cotton farms, then just doesn't make any sense, right? They're still producing 97% trash. But if they say that here's the numbers, here's the traceability, we are sourcing 100% of our fiber from organic farms, right? Then now that is something big, right? So like I said, there are different filters to do it. Thanks, Danny. I see you there. Have a good one, my friend. Great to have you over here. But yeah.
Very interesting. Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
Sure, Danny. I'm happy to share those with you separately. The slides. So here's a thought experiment that I want to do. I want you to, keeping in mind that you came in here with a specific thought, right? I want you to frame a question for me specifically for that particular thought or agenda. So for example, if let me just, go in here, right? Let's say Laura, right? You came in here, thinking about that the waste in the fashion industry continues to grow as a problem, right? I mean, to that particular aspect, I can just quickly, and if you want me to, illustrate how, this is both a problem that has, which has been solved in the informal sector for a long time, and is also a problem that is, being solved at the design stage. But I'm curious, whether this would be of interest to you, Laura, or if you have like another question that specifically applies to what you're doing.
Nothing that specifically applies. No, I just I think about some of those like online brands like Shein, for example, that are populating my Instagram feeds. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how long they've been around for, but I think I don't know, roughly 10 years ago, those companies didn't exist. And I know that 10 years ago, there was already still a lot of waste in the fashion industry, but it just seems that it seems to be growing at an alarming rate now within the last few years.
Absolutely. And hence, specifically to address this, Shein is really a symptom. Shein is really fulfilling a need that is there in the market. So the problem is not really Shein. The problem is the incentive structures for customers, right? Now, as a customer, I'm incentivized to buy cheap fashion, just wear it and throw it away. And that's where there's a certain amount of regulatory push or a regulatory play that needs to come in there. But then there's also a business model push that needs to come in there. So for example, when you have a fashion brand, which is not Shein, but is a competitor to Shein, who says, you know what, we recognize that you love fast fashion. We recognize that you want to wear new things every few months, right? This is where we can offer you a rental service, right? Where you can have these garments and you're literally just renting them from us for like a season, and you can bring them back to us. And so that's an opportunity that is not really taken off because of logistics costs and because Shein is just producing so cheap, right? But then this is where this coming together of regulation and business models can be a solution, because regulation has to acknowledge that Shein is actually externalizing costs. Shein is producing these garments in factories which are in China, where people are not being paid a living wage. That's leading to just more problems. So then this is where the non-tariff, the sort of the tariff barriers or the duties come into play for governments, right? And it's a political, problem, really. So that is why it's like a consumer behavior change problem, it's a business model problem, and it's a regulatory problem. So Shein is a symptom, right? The brand is fulfilling a need in the market. Addressing this problem really requires different levers. Yeah. So I know I've not answered the question per se, but these are the levers that can, or the levers that can really address this problem. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate that perspective. Thank you.
So I'm wondering, just to pick up on the back of what you were saying there, and to kind of circle back to a previous point you made, Pranav, whether with this waste issue, there's also an opportunity there because all that textile and all that material, especially if it's not been used for that long, is going to have a value if the technology existed to kind of reuse it, right? So it seems like quite a big opportunity for some regenerative business to come in there. I guess the challenge is going to be to reach scale. But
Absolutely.
it sounds like there's already people experimenting in that space, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, so just to expand on that, so I'm part of what we call Circular Design Challenge, and this is like something that has been running in India for 4 years now. Let me give you an example from the current applicant, one of the applicants, right? This is a business called Archive, RKIVE, right? And what they do is they look at rejects or leftovers, right? So for example, think of a situation where a Marks and Spencer or a large fashion brand ends up with maybe, this container full of trousers, which are of the same color, right? And maybe there was a problem with the entire lot, or maybe there's just a leftover from their entire production run, and they need to dispose of it, right? So they would normally send this to, some other country. They would just export it to an Africa or an India, and then they don't care what happens with it. Now, what Archive does is Archive takes those trousers, right, and then opens them up, literally opens up the trouser, opens up the stitching, and then makes the 3-dimensional trouser again 2-dimensional fabric. And then using again, the experience and the skill set that they have developed to recycle trousers, they create new products out of it. And these could be new trousers, these could be jackets, these could be other products. And they have developed this as a supply line. See, one of the biggest challenges that we have is when you're talking about recycling and upcycling, we usually talk about one garment at a time. And most brands cannot really take one garment. They cannot have like one of 100 types, like one, all different. However, if Archive tells them, you know what, I have like 3,000 pieces of jackets, which are in size S, M, L, XL, and they are made from upcycled trousers. And there's a certain design to that entire thing. Now that's a business, that's a value proposition. And this is running as a very successful business by, Archive. They're doing good.
Mm.
That's like, and so this is the term that we call out here. This is like pre-consumer waste. Customer has not returned this. So the pre-consumer waste is where a lot of action is taking place. There is also the post-consumer waste, right? And that's like a different ball game, because now the customer has worn the garment. So there's like hygiene issues also involved. And that requires an additional level of processing, right? Laura, I see your comment. I have textiles that are not able to find that. Absolutely. I totally agree. It's challenging in terms of what to do with them. So this is the interesting part, Laura. A lot of these big, names which say that they are recycling garments, or they say that they are distributing garments to needy people, right? Garments that are donated during Christmas or during, any of these festivals, for example, in India, where we donate stuff. A lot of these companies are actually just packaging them, they're sorting them, taking out the good ones to put them in thrift shops. And then all the others, they're just basically packaging together and shipping off in containers to third world countries, right? So there is another opportunity there. And that opportunity, and that is related to Fab Labs, and this has been like, it's a small scale business. It's not really scaled up that well because of the complexity of the business, but there's an opportunity nevertheless, right? Is around developing these local ecosystems where you have, an additional level of sorting. And this applies to certain types of materials. Like, so for example, denim, when denim is discarded, there's still a lot of value left. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with denim, right? So if you have a local loop out there, which has like a Fab Lab involved, which is around, manufacturing also, you can actually create a business model and tie up with local artisans and create a business which is providing livelihoods. It may start off as a social enterprise, but could potentially end up as a commercial business. Whether it's scalable or not, that's another question, right? That depends on the business model that we approach, but it's definitely an opportunity. You know, these local cells, as we call them, or local ecosystems, which have like Fab Lab involved, and they have like a self-help group involved, and they have like these thrift shops involved. It's a very nice ecosystem that can be built. It's a great opportunity. Yeah.
This is so cool. I think it would be easy to like talk about all the problems in the industry and so on, because there's clearly a lot of them. But what I love about what you've shared today is that it just seems to me like there's a massive opportunities, right? And it's really nice to end on this point, because I hope in the future, as V DAO grows, we'll start to see more people coming into the ecosystem that are interested in experimenting in this space. And I would love to stay in touch with Pranav, because as that happens and as more people come in, it might be the case that we spin up a V DAO pod specifically to touch on this circular fashion, because the opportunities here to me seem massive. So I just want to we're kind of reaching the end of our hour. I want to give just a final kind of couple of minutes if Laura or Olivia, do you have any final questions for Pranav before we wrap, or are we?
Nothing from my end. Thank you.
Cool.
Laura.
Cool.
Me, yes, I would like to know if Pranav is working with no, if USAID or if USA have presence in order to control or in order to help this movement, o sea,
so you mentioned
the
US
government
aid,
of USA.
US aid, right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I'm not working with them. Yeah, I'm not working with them.
Okay.
Yeah. But I know they do some great work. USA does a lot of work in this space. Yeah, I know that for a fact. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thanks a lot, Olivia. I just want to take this opportunity, Pranav, to thank you so much for joining us today. It was really that hour just like flew by, because it was packed full of insights and really interesting conversation at the end there as well. So thank you so much. I hope this is the start of a bigger conversation that unfolds over the coming months as V DAO grows and scales. And yeah, just thanks so much, man, for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Yeah. It's been great speaking with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranav.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Folks.
Bye bye.
Bye.